By 7 in the morning, the roof of Elena Montoya's laundry had begun to tick. The sound came from the warped tin sheets above her, each one expanding in the early heat with a dry little pop. Below, 3 oak tubs steamed beside a brick stove. Shirts, petticoats, tablecloths, and miners' socks hung from ropes strung across the room, turning the shack into a damp maze of other people's lives. Elena stood with both sleeves rolled past her elbows, rubbing a bar of hard soap across the collar of Senator Silas Graves's white linen shirt. The collar carried the usual orange dust from the road and a faint brown shadow from tobacco. There was something else this time, a dark blue smear along the inside cuff. Ink. She stopped scrubbing. Men like Graves did not sharpen pencils or fill ledgers. Other hands did that for them. Yet twice in the past month his cuffs had come to her stained with the same blue-black ink, and once she had found a curl of red sealing wax stuck beneath a button. The shirt had also carried the smell of mesquite smoke. Though Graves had spent that week telling the town he had never gone near the Western Survey Camp, Elena had learned not to ignore small things. A loose nail could tear a silk dress. One grain of sand trapped in a fold could grind a hole through cotton. A lie, if left alone long enough, could do the same to a life. She pressed the cuff beneath the water. The door opened behind her. Not knocked, opened. Lydia Sterling stepped inside, lifting the hem of her cream dress away from the wet boards. She was dressed for breakfast at the hotel, not for a laundry shack. Her gloves were pale gray, her hat trimmed with a narrow ribbon the color of lilacs. She smelled of jasmine water and the expensive face powder Elena had once washed from one of Graves's handkerchiefs. "Elena," Lydia said. Elena set the shirt on the washboard. "Miss Sterling." Lydia glanced at the clotheslines as if the damp sleeves might reach for her. "The senator is missing something. That happens to men with too many pockets." The answer came out before Elena could soften it. Lydia's mouth tightened. "His silver watch," she said. "He wore it yesterday. Then perhaps yesterday knows where it is." A board creaked outside. Elena looked toward the open door. A pair of boots stood beyond the threshold, motionless in the sun. Lydia moved farther into the room. She did not look at Elena now. She looked at the tubs. There were 3. The first held miners' clothes, the water gray with sweat and ore. The second held hotel linen. The third was clean except for the senator's shirt and 2 white handkerchiefs. Lydia went directly to the third. "What are you doing?" Elena asked. Lydia plunged her gloved hand into the hot water. She did not search. Her arm went down once and came up holding a silver watch by its chain. For a moment only the roof ticked. Water streamed from the engraved case. It fell through the slats of the floor and darkened the dirt below. Senator Graves entered with Sheriff Jedediah Miller at his shoulder. Graves wore a black coat despite the heat. His silver hair was trimmed close at the temples, and his expression held the calm displeasure of a man who had discovered a servant had chipped a plate. "There it is," he said. Elena stared at Lydia's glove. The leather around her fingers was wet, but the cuff remained dry. She had carried the watch in her palm. "You put it there," Elena said. Lydia's face changed, though only slightly. Her eyes flicked to Graves. The senator took the watch and weighed it in his hand. "That is a serious accusation from a woman caught with stolen property." "It was not in that tub." Sheriff Miller stepped inside and removed his hat. He had a narrow face and a mustache that never seemed to sit straight. His badge shone brighter than anything else about him. "Elena," he said quietly, "best come along without trouble." She looked from him to Graves. "Come along where?" Neither man answered. That silence frightened her more than a charge would have. 2 of Graves's mine guards appeared at the door. One was Amos Rusk, broad across the chest, with a pale scar from his ear to his jaw. The other, Lou Pritchard, had been drinking before breakfast. Elena could smell rye on him from 6 feet away. They seized her arms. She kicked backward, catching the stove leg. A kettle rattled. Hot water jumped over the rim and hissed across the brick. "I have done nothing," she said. Rusk twisted her wrist until her knees bent. Lydia stood beside the tub. Water dripping from her glove, she kept her gaze on the floor. Elena understood then that this had not begun that morning. The accusation was only the last stitch in a garment cut long before she saw it. Graves slipped the watch into his vest pocket, but the chain snagged on a button. For an instant, the case sprang open. There were no hands beneath the glass, no face, only a flat inner cover and the narrow edge of something folded behind it. Graves snapped it shut. His eyes met Elena's. That was why. Not the watch, what it carried. The guards dragged her into the street. Silver Creek was already hot enough to blur the far end of the road. The town had grown around a silver mine and never learned the difference between growth and fever. New boards covered old mud walls. A bank with green shutters leaned beside a saloon whose roof sagged in the middle. Ore wagons groaned past women carrying market baskets. Dust clung to every boot, every skirt, every tongue. People stopped when they saw Elena. Mrs. Bell from the boarding house came out holding a wooden spoon. The barber stepped into his doorway with foam on one cheek. 2 miners crossed from the saloon. By the time the guards reached the square, a crowd had formed without anyone admitting they had joined it. Elena Montoya stole the senator's watch, Pritchard announced. The words moved faster than truth ever did. A thief, the laundress, a silver watch. By the livery stable, a boy dropped a currycomb. Toby Vance was 14 and thin as a fence rail. His hair hung over one eye. He stared at Lydia Sterling, who had followed at a distance with one hand pressed to her throat. Elena saw terror on his face, not surprise. "Terror, Toby," she called. The boy flinched. Rusk shoved her forward. "Keep walking." They did not turn toward the sheriff's office. They went to the old cottonwood near the livery, where a buckboard had been parked beneath the thickest branch. A rope lay in the wagon bed. The crowd quieted. Elena felt her stomach become very cold. Sheriff Miller hurried after them. "Senator, we said she'd be held." Graves did not lower his voice. "And risk a rescue by her cousins across the border? Risk the evidence disappearing? You heard the mine men last month. Theft has become a disease. She has no cousins here. Then there will be no rescue." Miller looked toward the people gathering along the boardwalk. He could have stopped it then. Elena saw that clearly. He had a gun, a badge, and the authority of his office. What he lacked was the willingness to be alone. He climbed onto the buckboard and turned to the crowd. "The senator's watch was discovered in Elena Montoya's washtub," he said. "In unsettled territory, theft of valuable property is not punishable without a hearing," called the school teacher from somewhere in the back. Graves turned his head. The teacher disappeared behind 2 taller men. Miller swallowed. "Given the certainty of the evidence and the danger of delay, sentence will be carried out." A murmur went through the square. Some faces brightened. Others looked away. Elena had washed clothes for nearly all of them. She knew which man used lamp oil to hide the smell of drink, which woman stitched coins into her husband's winter coat, which child wet the bed during thunderstorms. She had held their secrets in wet cloth and never sold one. Now they stood beneath the sun and let a rope be fitted around her neck. The hemp scratched beneath her ear, the knot pressed against the base of her skull. Rusk tied her hands, though she had nowhere to go. Graves stepped close enough that she could see a nick in his clean-shaven chin. "You should have kept your eyes on the washboard," he said. Elena raised her voice so the people nearest could hear. "You should have kept your map out of my laundry." The calm left his face, only for a heartbeat. Then he smiled. "She's raving." But Toby Vance made a small sound near the stable door. Graves looked at him. The boy backed into the shadow. Miller stood beside the wagon wheel, rubbing his thumb over the seam of his holster. "Last words?" Elena looked at the crowd. She could have begged. Some part of her wanted to. Her body wanted life in the simple animal way everybody did. It wanted cold water, shade, another sunrise, another bowl of beans eaten beside her stove. It wanted the unfinished blue dress hanging behind her bed and the packet of child seeds her mother had carried north. Instead, she said, "You will remember where you stood." The driver gathered the reins. A horse came hard down the east road. The sound arrived first, 4 steady beats, no hesitation. The crowd turned as a bay gelding entered the square at a controlled gallop, dust lifting behind it. The rider wore a brown trail coat and a flat-brimmed hat bleached by weather. A Winchester rested across his saddle. He was broad through the shoulders, older than Elena first thought, with silver beginning at his temples and a long scar running from the corner of his mouth into the chateau of his jaw. He reined in beside the wagon. No one greeted him. Somebody whispered, "Apache." The rider looked at Elena, then at the rope, then at Sheriff Miller. His eyes were very dark and very tired. "Move the wagon," Graves ordered. The driver flicked the reins. The rider drew his revolver and fired once. The bullet struck the wagon tongue an inch from the driver's boot. The horses jumped but did not bolt. The crowd scattered 3 steps in every direction, then stopped. The rider lowered the gun. "I said nothing about moving," he told the driver. "That was your first mistake." Graves pushed through the people. "Who in God's name are you?" The man reached beneath his coat and took out a federal badge. He did not pin it on. He held it where the sunlight found the worn metal. Deputy United States Marshal Nantan Chato. The square went still enough to hear the harness rings tremble. Graves recovered first. This is a local execution. It is a lynching. She stole federal property from a United States senator. Then it is a federal matter. A few people glanced at one another. Chato had taken the senator's own importance and turned it against him. Graves's lips thinned. You have no warrant. Chato looked at the rope around Elena's neck. Neither do you. Sheriff Miller stepped forward, trying to gather what remained of his authority. Marshal, I am the law in Silver Creek. Chato studied him. Then I have arrived just in time. A miner laughed before remembering he should not. Miller flushed. Chato dismounted. He moved without hurry, but the crowd opened for him. The Winchester stayed in his left hand. His right rested near his revolver. He climbed onto the buckboard, drew a short knife, and cut the rope above Elena's head. The noose dropped against her collarbone. Up close, Elena saw that his scar was older than the rest of his face. She also saw no pity in his expression, only attention. Can you stand? He asked. I am standing. Something almost changed in his eyes. Good. He cut her wrists free. Graves reached for the watch in his vest. Chato saw the movement. That, Chato said, stays with me. The senator laughed. My property? Evidence in a federal investigation. What investigation? The one you just made necessary. Chato held out his hand. For the first time, Graves hesitated in front of the town. It was a small thing, but Elena felt the balance shift. The senator removed the watch and dropped it into Chato's palm. You are overreaching. Then right to Washington. Chato stepped down and motioned for Elena to follow. She climbed from the wagon. Her knees shook when her boots touched the road, but she locked them and stood straight. The cut rope trailed behind her for 2 steps before she pulled it off and left it in the dust. They walked toward the stone jail at the west end of town. The crowd followed. Not close, not yet. Chato kept Elena on his left, away from the hotel roofs. He watched windows, alleys, water barrels, and hands. The back of his coat showed 3 repaired tears, each sewn with a different color of thread. You came for him, Elena said. I came for a missing surveyor. Is he dead? I expect so. He met Graves. I expect that too. She looked at the watch in his hand. Chato did not ask how she knew. Did you see it? Only the edge. Anyone else? Toby may have seen Lydia plant the watch. The stable boy? Yes. Chato glanced toward the livery. Toby was gone. Behind them, Graves called to the crowd. Are you going to let a stranger carry a thief into your own jail? The words stirred the people. Men began to move again. Chato stopped in the middle of the road and turned. He did not raise his rifle. Elena Montoya is in federal custody as a witness, he said. Anyone who touches her will answer to a federal court. Anyone who fires at the jail will answer to me before the court has the chance. Your court is 3 days away, Graves shouted. Chato looked at the rifles in the crowd. I am not. The people stopped. At the jail steps, Sheriff Miller hurried around them and blocked the door. You cannot take my building. Chato placed the Winchester muzzle against Miller's belt buckle. I am not taking it. I am giving you one chance to use it honestly. Miller's face drained. He fumbled with the ring of keys. Metal rang against metal as he tried 3 before finding the lock. The door opened into cool darkness. Chato ushered Elena inside, followed her, and turned to Miller. Go home. This is my jail, not tonight. Miller looked over his shoulder at Graves. The senator stood in the road, surrounded by men but somehow smaller than before. The sheriff stepped out. Chato shut the door and lowered the iron bar across it. Outside, voices rose. Inside, Elena leaned both hands on the nearest desk and breathed until the room stopped tilting. The jail smelled of damp limestone, coal oil, and old straw. There were 3 cells, a narrow office, a washstand, and a high window covered by iron bars. A blue enamel cup sat beside a ledger. Someone had left half a biscuit on a plate, hard enough to use as a stone. Chato checked the rear wall, the window, the cell locks, and the door hinges. Then he placed the watch on the desk. Elena rubbed the rope mark on her neck. You knew about the surveyor, he said. I washed the senator's shirts. That is not an answer. It is the answer. Men leave more truth in dirty clothes than they do in confession. Chato looked at her. She told him about the ink, the sealing wax, the mesquite smoke from the western camp, the torn corner of a map she had once found in a coat pocket, marked with red lines and a government seal. Graves had returned for it himself, pale beneath his anger. 2 days later, the surveyor vanished. And Lydia? Chato asked. She shares the senator's rooms when his wife is in Tucson. I know because I wash what she leaves there. Why frame you now? Yesterday I asked Graves whether the surveyor would be needing his shirts returned. You wanted him to know you had noticed. I wanted him to pay the 3 months he owed me. Chato gave her a long, unreadable look. You threatened a senator over laundry money. I asked for wages. In Silver Creek, that may be the same thing. A stone struck the outer door, then another. The crowd had reached the steps. Chato picked up the watch and turned it over. The back bore an eagle with spread wings. He pressed the crown. It spun freely. It never ticked, Elena said. He held it to his ear. Outside, someone shouted, "Bring out the thief." The words were taken up by others. Chato set the watch down. They are not here for you. They had a rope around my neck. They are here because Graves needs the watch. You were the road to it. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. He began moving furniture. Elena joined him without being asked. Together they shoved the desk away from the window, rolled a water barrel against the front wall, and wedged a heavy storage chest beneath the door bar. The work steadied her. Wood scraped stone. Iron brackets groaned. Their breathing settled into the practical rhythm of lifting, turning, placing. At the rear of the jail, Chato knelt beside the wall. The mortar between 2 stones had been patched recently. "How old is this building?" he asked. 20 years. The mine powder house is behind the alley." He pressed a thumb into the patched seam. Sand loosened. "Then Graves has 2 doors," he said. "One made of oak, one he can make himself." Elena looked toward the high window. Sunset had begun to stain the bars red. "How long until help comes?" "I sent a telegram from Red Wash yesterday. Marshal Pike and 2 deputies were to meet me here tomorrow morning." "Were to?" "The line went dead an hour after I sent it, so we do not know whether help is coming." "No," the crowd outside shouted again. Chato lit the desk lamp. Its amber glow made the room feel smaller. Elena sat on the edge of a cell cot. Her body had begun to discover every bruise. Purple marks rose on her arms where Rusk had held her. Her wrists were raw. Beneath her jaw, the rope had left a red crescent. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Chato was removing cartridges from his belt and arranging them on the desk. "At the wagon?" "Yes, because there was a rope. Men ride past ropes every day." He placed the last cartridge beside the lamp. "Then they should be asked why." "That is not an answer either." He looked at the badge lying near his hand. "When I was 11, soldiers came to our camp looking for a man who was not there. They tied my uncle to a mesquite and questioned him until he could no longer answer. 30 people watched. Some were frightened. Some agreed with the soldiers. Most told themselves it was not their business. The room was silent except for the mob outside. "What happened?" Elena asked. "He died before dark." Chato touched the edge of the badge. "I learned that a crowd is not proof. A uniform is not law. And silence is a decision." Elena did not offer sympathy. It would have felt too small. Instead, she reached for the blue enamel cup, filled it from the water jar, and set it beside him. He drank. A knock sounded at the door. Not a fist, knuckles. Chato extinguished the lamp. The room turned blue with the last daylight. "Who?" he called. "Lydia." Elena stood. Chato motioned her behind the inner wall. He removed the chest from beneath the bar, but left the bar in place. "What do you want?" he asked. "I brought water. We have water. I need to speak to you." Elena could smell jasmine through the cracks. Chato lifted the bar just enough to open the door the width of his forearm. Lydia stood on the porch with a covered pitcher. Her hat was gone. Dust marked the hem of her dress, and one glove was missing. Her eyes darted past him, to the desk, to the watch. "You found it," she whispered. "You helped. I did not know he meant to hang her." Elena stepped into view. "You watched them tie the rope." Lydia's mouth opened, then closed. "I thought Miller would stop it," she said. "Miller thought you would," Elena answered. The crowd had retreated toward the hotel for more whiskey, leaving the street briefly empty. Lydia kept looking over her shoulder. "He will kill anyone who opens that case," she said. "What is inside?" Chato asked. "I never saw it, but you know. I know what he said when the clasp broke. He said the whole territory was hidden behind that cover. He told me to take it to the laundry and make sure Elena was blamed. He said no jury would believe a Mexican washerwoman over a senator." Elena's hands tightened. Lydia noticed. "He owns the judge. He owns the sheriff. He owns the bank. What was I supposed to do?" "Not this," Elena said. Lydia's face twisted with something that might have become shame if fear had not been stronger. She thrust the pitcher toward Chato. "There is a note beneath the lid. Miller has offered $500 for the watch and $500 for your body. They will attack after full dark. The front gunfire will be a distraction. Rusk has powder." Chato took the pitcher. Will you testify? He asked. Lydia stepped back. No. Then you did not come to help Elena. I came because if Graves falls, he will drag me with him. That may be what truth costs. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. You speak as though there is a clean place to stand. There was. You left it when you entered the laundry. Lydia turned and hurried down the steps. Elena watched her cross the road, pale dress fading into dusk. She will warn him, we know, Elena said. She already did. She looked at the watch before she looked at you. Chato lifted the pitcher lid. A narrow paper was tucked beneath it. 3 lines had been written in a hurried hand. Rusk takes powder through alley at 11. Miller orders front volley. Graves wants map before dawn. Elena read it twice. She knows there is a map. Now we do too. Chato relit the lamp and brought the watch close to the flame. He traced the engraved eagle with one fingernail. A tiny notch lay beneath the left wing. He pressed it. Nothing happened. He turned the crown, pressed again, and heard a faint click. The back opened a fraction. Before he could lift it, a rifle cracked outside. The bullet struck the door and buried itself in the oak. A second shot broke the upper window. Glass fell across the desk. Chato swept the lamp to the floor and stamped out the flame. Darkness took the jail as men began to shout in the street. Elena crouched behind the stone partition. Chato moved to the barred window with his Winchester. The first true night of Silver Creek's reckoning had begun. The second bullet struck the door lower than the first. The oak jumped in its frame, shaking dust from the lintel. Outside men cheered. Chato did not return fire. He stood to one side of the broken window, listening. Elena could hear boots on the boardwalk, the clink of spurs, the scrape of a rifle barrel against a porch post. The crowd had scattered into smaller groups now. They sounded braver because they could no longer see one another's faces. "Why are you waiting?" she whispered. "For them to believe I am frightened." A man shouted from across the street, "Marshal, send the woman out and you can ride away." Chato glanced toward Elena. "They think you came for me," she said. "They need to." A third shot came through the broken window and struck the rear wall. Stone chips stung Elena's cheek. Chato raised his rifle, aimed through the bars, and fired once. There was a cry outside, followed by the crash of a dropped weapon. "Did you kill him?" Elena asked. "No. How do you know? I shot the rifle." The cheering stopped. In the silence, Chato opened the watch. The inner plate lifted on a narrow hinge. Behind it lay a folded sheet no larger than 2 fingers laid side by side. The paper had been pressed so tightly that its edges held the curve of the case. Chato slid it free. A gust came through the broken window. He closed his hand around the paper before it could move. Elena crawled to the desk. They crouched together behind the stone wall while gunfire struck the front of the building in uneven bursts. The map unfolded in 4 small panels. It bore the seal of the Territorial Survey Office and the signature of a man named Clarence Vale. Red lines marked the lawful boundary of Graves's mining claim. Black lines showed the mine's actual tunnels. The two did not match. The deepest shafts crossed the boundary by nearly half a mile and ran beneath land reserved by federal treaty. Elena stared at the tiny marks. "I saw that seal," she said, "on the scrap in his coat." Chato examined the lower corner. There in Vale's hand was a note, original field survey. Copy refused by claimant S. Graves, duplicate to be delivered to federal office at Prescott. Vale made 2, Chato said, and 1 never arrived, neither did he. Another volley hammered the door. Chato folded the map and slipped it inside his shirt beneath the leather thong that held a small medicine pouch. Then he placed the empty watch back on the desk. "The case stays where they can see it," he said. "Allure, a lie deserves company." He motioned Elena toward the rear cell. She did not move. "Lydia said powder comes through the alley. I heard her. You cannot watch both walls." "I can if you stay alive and let me work. I have spent 12 years working beside boiling lye. I can do more than stay alive." Chato studied her, then pointed to the water barrel. "Fill every cup, bucket, and basin. Put them near the rear wall. For fire, for dust after the blast. Powder kills with stone as often as flame." Elena moved. She found 2 iron buckets, a dented wash basin, 3 tin cups, and the enamel pitcher Lydia had brought. The work made sense to her in a way fear did not. She filled them carefully, leaving enough water in the barrel for drinking. Then she soaked 2 blankets and laid them near the cells. Chato pulled the desk sideways and made a low barricade facing the patched rear wall. He placed spare cartridges beneath it and cut a narrow firing slit in the wool blanket so moonlight would not catch the metal of his rifle. Outside, Graves's voice rose above the men. "Nantan Chato!" You are harboring a convicted thief and withholding a United States Senator's property. Surrender the watch and I will guarantee safe passage." Chato leaned toward the window. "You tried to hang my witness before breakfast. Your guarantees expire quickly." Laughter moved through the crowd, nervous and brief. Graves's answer was colder. "You are one man. Then why are there 50 of you?" This time the laughter lasted longer. The senator cursed. Sheriff Miller shouted for silence. Elena listened to the change in the street. Graves had controlled the crowd when they believed she was helpless. Chato's refusal made the men conscious of themselves. They began to sound like individuals again. One coughing, one arguing about ammunition, another saying he had only come to see what happened. "Can they turn against him?" Elena asked. Crowds turn toward whatever they fear most. And what do they fear now? Not knowing who will pay them. A faint scrape came from the alley. Chato raised one hand. The front gunfire resumed at once, louder and more regular. Miller had organized it into volleys. Behind the noise came the dull drag of something heavy over dirt, powder kegs. Chato moved to the rear barricade. Elena crouched beside the nearest bucket. "Go to the front cell," he said. No, that was not a request. Then it was poorly made. The rear wall gave a soft tremor as metal touched stone outside. Chato looked at her. She held his gaze. "If the blast opens that wall, you will need someone to put out burning cloth, pass cartridges, and strike the first man who thinks I am too afraid to fight." The corner of his mouth shifted. "Use the iron bucket," he said, "not the tin one." A figure moved past the high rear vent. Then another. The scrape stopped. Elena smelled it before Chato did, or perhaps she recognized it faster. Sulfur, charcoal, and the oily sweetness of powder. The scent seeped through the cracked mortar. "Fuse," she whispered. Chato seized the wet blankets and threw one over Elena, pulling her down behind the desk. He wrapped the other around his shoulders and pressed his body against the floor. The world struck them. The explosion came as white light and pressure. The rear wall buckled inward. One limestone block shattered against the desk. The lamp chimney burst. Dust filled Elena's mouth and nose. She could not hear, only feel a deep ringing through her bones. She opened her eyes. Everything was gray. Chato's hand gripped the back of her dress and dragged her away from the falling stones. A second section of wall collapsed with a heavy roar. Men entered through the smoke. The first carried a pry bar. Chato rose from the floor and drove the rifle stock into his chest. The man folded over it. Chato turned, using the same motion to strike a second intruder's wrist before the revolver there could fire. The weapon discharged into the ceiling. Elena crawled toward the iron bucket. A third man came through the breach, Lou Pritchard. His face was bloodless beneath the dust, his eyes bright with whiskey and fear. "There she is," he shouted. He reached for Elena. She swung the bucket with both hands. The iron rim struck his forearm. His fingers opened. She swung again lower, catching his knee. He fell against the broken stones. Elena kicked his revolver into the cell. The room flashed with Chato's rifle. A bullet struck the pry bar from the first man's hands. Another intruder retreated through the breach, dragging his companion. Chato did not chase them. He grabbed Pritchard by the collar and pulled him behind the desk. "Who set the charge?" Chato asked. Pritchard coughed limestone dust. "Rusk, where is he?" "Outside." "Where is Sheriff Miller?" "Front Street." "Where is Graves?" Pritchard looked toward the breach. Chato pressed the rifle barrel beneath his chin. "Hotel porch," Pritchard said. "He said he'd come in after we cleared you." Elena stood over him with the bucket still raised. Pritchard looked at her and began to laugh, though the sound shook. "You should have taken the hanging. Would have been quicker." Elena lowered the bucket. "For you, perhaps." She took his belt, bound his wrists, and locked him in the nearest cell. The mob fired again, but the bullets came less often. The explosion had not produced the quick victory Graves promised. Men had seen Rusk's attackers stumble back from the hole. The sight made courage expensive. Chato checked Elena's face. Blood ran from a cut near her hairline. "You are hurt. So are you." His left shoulder hung lower than the right. A piece of stone had torn the back of his coat. Dark blood spread beneath it. "It missed the bone," he said. "You do not know that. I can move my arm. So can a man with a cracked bone until he cannot." She found the cleanest cloth in the jail, a narrow strip torn from the sheriff's spare shirt, and washed the wound. Chato sat with his back against the desk, rifle across his knees. He made no sound while she picked grit from the cut. The wound was long but shallow. "Hold this," she said, pressing folded cloth against it. He obeyed. It was the first time. A small tapping came from the floor near the front wall. Elena froze. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Chato moved to the door. The tapping came again, low and quick, not from the porch, but from the drain opening at the base of the wall. "Toby?" Elena whispered. A boy's voice answered through the pipe. "Miss Montoya?" She dropped to her knees. "Toby, where are you?" "Under the porch. Don't open the door. They're watching." "What are you doing here?" "I saw her." Elena closed her eyes. "What did you see?" "Miss Sterling this morning. She put the watch in the clean tub." Chato knelt beside Elena. "Can you testify to that in court?" The boy was silent. Gunfire cracked from the saloon roof. Toby's breath came through the pipe. "Will the senator be there?" "Yes," Chato said. "Then no." Elena leaned closer. "Toby, listen to me. You do not owe us bravery that gets you killed. Tell us what you can and go back to the stable." I wrote it down. A folded scrap appeared through the drain. Pushed by 2 dirty fingers, Chato took it. The note was written in uneven pencil. Toby described seeing Lydia plant the watch, Graves waiting outside, and Rusk carrying a powder keg from the mine shed. At the bottom he had added something else, Mr. Vale left his red survey book with me to hide in the oat bin. He said if he did not return, I should give it to a federal man. Chato pressed his mouth to the pipe. "Where is the book?" "Under the floor of the 3rd stall. Can you bring it?" Silence again. Elena looked at Chato sharply. He changed his question. "Can you stay hidden until morning?" "Yes, then do that. Marshal Pike may come from the East Road. If you see 3 riders with federal badges, lead them to the book." "What if Graves's men find me first?" Chato looked at the jagged breach, then at the dark street beyond the window. "Take the senator's black horse," he said. "He will not shoot his own animal. Ride east and do not stop." Toby gave a breath that was almost a laugh. "All right." His fingers disappeared. Elena waited until she heard the faint scrape of his body moving beneath the porch. "You asked a child to bring evidence through a gunfight," she said. I corrected myself. "After I looked at you." Yes, the admission disarmed her anger. Chato unfolded Toby's note again. "Vale's survey book will contain field measurements, dates, perhaps witness signatures. The map proves the boundary. The book proves who knew. And the boy proves the watch was planted. Yes, he is in danger now." He was in danger the moment he saw Lydia's hand. Outside, Graves shouted for Rusk. No answer came. The senator crossed the road. They heard his boots on the porch. "Elena," he called through the door. Her body tightened at the sound of her name in his mouth. "I know you can hear me. This has gone too far. Give the marshal the watch and come out. I will tell the town there was a misunderstanding." Chato watched her. Elena moved to the door but remained behind the stone edge. "A misunderstanding does not tie its own knot," she said. Graves lowered his voice. "I can restore your business. You never paid for the work I already did. I can give you land. You stole yours. Silence." Then the senator said, "Your mother's homestead in San Miguel Canyon. You think I do not know about it? The taxes are 6 years behind. I can erase the debt." Elena's breath stopped. The homestead had been her mother's last piece of earth, 40 rocky acres in the high country, where cottonwoods grew along a narrow creek. Elena had left after the drought, planning to return once she had saved enough. Each year the taxes had risen. Each year Silver Creek had consumed what she saved. Graves knew because the land records passed through his office. "I can sign it to you tonight," he said. "A clean deed, water rights included." Chato said nothing. The offer reached into Elena with cruel precision. She saw the small adobe house, the peach tree that had survived 2 winters, her mother's cracked blue bowl on the shelf. She saw soil dark enough to hold seed. All she had to do was surrender a watch that no longer held its secret and step outside. Graves would learn the map was gone when he opened it. Then he would kill her anyway. Elena put one hand against the door. "You already taught me what your signature is worth," she said. A shot exploded through the panel at head height. Chato pulled her down as splinters crossed the room. Graves's footsteps retreated. The offer had ended. For the next hour, the siege settled into an ugly patience. Shots came whenever a shadow moved. Men tried the front steps twice and withdrew when Chato fired into the boards before their boots. Rusk attempted to crawl through the breach and found Elena waiting with the iron bucket and Pritchard's revolver. She did not shoot. She fired into the stone beside his hand. The ricochet screamed through the alley, and Rusk vanished into the dark. Chato's shoulder stiffened. Elena changed the bandage twice. They drank sparingly from Lydia's pitcher. Near 3 in the morning, the town bell rang once. No one had touched it. A moment later, hoofbeats pounded from the livery. A black stallion burst into the street with Toby flattened over its neck. One of Graves's men shouted, Another fired, but the shot went wide as the senator roared at him not to hit the horse. Toby reached the east road and disappeared into the dark. Graves stood in the center of the street, cursing every man near him. Chato watched through the bars. "The boy chose," Elena said. "Yes. Will he make it?" "The horse will. That is not what I asked. It is all I know." The first gray light appeared behind the roofs. Dawn did not arrive as rescue. It came slowly, exposing what darkness had hidden. Bullet scars in the jail door, blood on the porch, broken bottles in the street, men asleep against barrels with rifles across their laps. The crowd had thinned to perhaps 20. Graves remained. So did Miller. The sheriff sat on the hotel steps with his head in his hands. His badge caught the growing light. Chato unfolded the survey map one last time and placed Toby's note beside it. He had copied the names, measurements, and seal into the jail ledger in case the paper was destroyed. Elena watched him finish. "You prepare for losing it," she said. "I prepare for men like Graves, and if Pike does not come, we walk out. Into them? Staying gives Graves time to bring more powder. Walking out makes him answer in daylight." She looked through the shattered window. The sky over the eastern ridge had turned the color of pale copper. Her fear had not gone. It had changed shape. During the night, it had been a hand around her throat. Now it was a stone she could carry. Chato gave her Pritchard's revolver. "Do you know how to use it?" "I know which end makes men reconsider." He showed her the safety notch, the cylinder, the way to keep her finger outside the trigger guard. "Do not fire into a crowd," he said. "Pick the man who has decided to kill you. How will I know? You knew the watch was wrong by its weight." He tucked the map beneath his coat and placed the empty watch in his vest pocket. Toby's note went into the medicine pouch. The copied ledger page he folded into the lining of his hat. 3 pieces of evidence in 3 places. Then he lifted the iron bar. Elena straightened her torn apron. Dust whitened her hair and clothing. Dried blood marked one temple. She looked nothing like the woman who had entered the jail at sunset. She felt more like herself than she had in years. The door opened. Morning entered with the smell of cold ash, horse sweat, and creosote. Chato stepped onto the porch. Elena walked beside him. Across the street, Silas Graves rose from the hotel steps. The town gathered to watch them finish what the night had failed to decide. The street looked wider in daylight. Night had crowded everything close. The shouting, the torches, the rifle flashes, the stone walls. Morning put distance between objects and made each person stand alone with what he had done. The miners who remained near the saloon avoided Elena's eyes. Mrs. Bell stood in the doorway of the boarding house with her apron clenched in one fist. The schoolteacher had returned and now held his hat against his chest. 2 women Elena knew from church watched from behind the mercantile window, their faces pale in the glass. Amos Rusk waited at the foot of the jail steps with a shotgun. Sheriff Miller stood 10 paces behind him. Silas Graves occupied the center of the road as though it were a platform built for him. His coat had collected dust during the night, and his silver hair had fallen loose above one eyebrow. He looked older, but not weaker. Men like Graves did not surrender power because they had lost control of a room. They simply looked for another room. Chato descended 1 step. Rusk raised the shotgun. Chato stopped. "Elena Montoya is alive," Graves said to the town. "The marshal has had his night of theater. Now we will return to law." Elena almost laughed. Chato's voice stayed level. "Sheriff Miller, order that man to lower his weapon." Miller's gaze moved from Rusk to Graves. "Amos." Rusk did not lower it. Graves smiled. "You see? Even your own sheriff understands where authority lies." Miller's mouth tightened. "I told him to lower it. You whispered." The sheriff looked at Chato. Something in him had worn through during the night. Perhaps fear could be stretched only so far before it became another kind of courage. Or perhaps Miller had finally understood that Graves's protection ended the moment the senator needed someone else to blame. He drew his revolver and aimed it at Rusk. "Put it down, Amos." Rusk turned his head. "You serious?" "For once." The shotgun dipped a fraction. Graves took 1 step toward Miller. "Remember who bought that badge?" Miller's face reddened. "That is the first honest thing you have said in years." The men near the saloon shifted. Graves saw the change and raised his voice. "The marshal is carrying forged papers. He intends to seize the Silver Creek mine for the federal government and hand it to the Apache tribes. Every deed in this town will be voided. Every wage will stop. Your homes, your savings, your children's futures, gone." Fear moved through the crowd more quickly than anger. A miner named Caleb Dunn stepped forward. He had 6 children and a mortgage held by Graves's bank. Is that true? He asked Chato. The main mine tunnels cross federal treaty land, Chato said. That is true. A murmur rose. Graves spread his hands. There, he admits it. The mine will be surveyed, Chato continued. Claims will be reviewed in court. Workers who were deceived are not the same as the man who concealed the boundary. Courts. Graves scoffed. Years of hearings while your families starve. The federal government will take the ore and leave you the dust. Caleb's expression hardened with panic. My savings are in the bank. And mine, said another man. Graves pointed at Chato. Then take the map from him before he destroys all of us. Several rifles moved. Elena stepped down beside Chato. She felt the revolver beneath her apron, heavy against her hip. She did not draw it. You already lost your savings, she told Caleb. You just do not know where he put them. The miner stared at her. Last winter, Elena said. Your wife brought me your bank coat because the inside pocket had torn. There were deposit slips in it. Graves's bank promised you 6%. Did you ever receive a statement? Caleb said nothing. You told me the clerk said the books were being balanced. He looked toward the bank. Elena turned to the others. Mrs. Bell, how many weeks has the hotel owed you for bread? The boarding house keeper's jaw worked. 9. Mr. Sloan, did the mine pay for the mule that died in Shaft 4? The livery owner looked down. No. The senator says the town will be ruined if his papers are examined. Ask yourselves why a rich man's ruin sounds so much like the life you already have. Graves's face darkened. You wash clothes, he said. Do not pretend to understand finance. I understand unpaid bills. A few people made quiet sounds of agreement. Graves drew his revolver. He did it smoothly, with none of Miller's hesitation. Chato's rifle came up at the same instant. The two men faced each other across 15 feet of pale dust. Give me the map, Graves said. No, Chato answered. You will not leave this street alive. Then neither will your secret. Graves's eyes flicked toward Elena. She saw the decision before the gun moved. Chato saw it too. He stepped between them as Graves fired. The bullet struck the porch post beside Chato's head. Chato's return shot hit the road at Graves's feet, throwing dust across his boots. It was a warning, and everyone understood it as one. Graves fired again. Sheriff Miller struck his arm from the side. The bullet went through the hotel sign. Rusk lifted the shotgun. Elena drew Pritchard's revolver and aimed at him. Do not, she said. Rusk looked at her hands. Perhaps expecting them to shake, they did not. For years, those hands had lifted wet wool, wrung blankets, carried boiling kettles, and mended cloth beneath weak lamplight. A revolver was not heavier than any of that. Rusk lowered the shotgun. Miller kicked Graves's weapon away. The senator stared at him in disbelief. You are finished. Miller kept his gun trained on Graves. Maybe, but I will finish honest. The moment might have held. Then a bell rang from the east road. Not the town bell, a harness bell. Everyone turned. 3 riders appeared beyond the last row of buildings. The first wore a long gray coat and a federal badge. Behind him rode a younger deputy and Toby Vance on Graves's black stallion. Toby clutched a red leather survey book beneath his shirt. Marshal Aaron Pike raised one hand as he entered the square. Federal officers, he called. Weapons down. The crowd obeyed with surprising speed. Rifles touched dirt. Pick handles fell. Men who had spent the night shouting now stepped away from one another, as though distance might erase their participation. Toby slid from the stallion before it fully stopped. His knees nearly folded when his boots hit the ground. Elena went to him. He held out the book. I found them, he said. His face was gray with exhaustion. A cut marked his chin, and his shirt had torn at one shoulder. You rode all the way to Red Wash? I met them at the dry bridge. The telegraph operator had given Marshal Pike your message before Graves's men cut the wire. Chato took the red book. Did anyone follow you? 2 men. Deputy Pike's man stopped them. Pike dismounted. He was a tall, raw-boned man with a beard the color of iron filings. His gaze moved over the damaged jail, the rifles on the ground, and Chato's blood-stiff coat. You have a talent for choosing quiet assignments, he said. Chato handed him the survey map. Clarence Vale's original field map, hidden inside Graves's watch. Pike read the seal and signature. His humor vanished. Toby held out his written statement. I saw Miss Sterling put the watch in the laundry. Graves recovered his voice. The boy is a liar. Chato coached him. I had not spoken to the marshal before last night, Toby said. His voice was small, but the street carried it. Pike opened Vale's red survey book. Pages of measurements, sketches, dates, and witness marks filled it. Near the back, Vale had written a final entry. Senator Graves refuses revised boundary. Claims he will settle matter before Prescott receives copy. Sheriff Miller present. Miss Lydia Sterling present in adjoining room. Miller closed his eyes. Pike looked at him. Were you present? Yes. The admission fell heavily. Graves turned on him. Choose your next word carefully. Miller's face trembled. Vale showed us the boundary. Silas said the survey was wrong. 2 nights later, Vale disappeared. Did you investigate? Pike asked. No. Why? Miller looked at the badge on his own chest. Because I was paid not to. No one spoke. Pike removed the badge from Miller's shirt. You are under arrest for obstruction, conspiracy, and participation in an unlawful execution. Miller surrendered his revolver. Graves laughed, but the sound carried no confidence. On the testimony of a coward and a stable boy, on a federal map, a survey ledger, a concealed evidence case, a witness statement, and the remains of an attack on a federal jail, Pike said. That is enough to begin. You cannot prove I ordered the attack. A woman's voice came from the hotel porch. Yes, they can. Lydia Sterling stood in the doorway. She wore the same cream dress, now wrinkled and stained. Her hair had come loose from its pins. In one hand she held a packet of letters tied with green ribbon. Graves stared at her. Lydia descended the steps slowly. I kept your instructions, she said. Every note you sent because I was afraid you would deny what you asked me to do. You foolish woman, yes. The answer seemed to surprise even her. She gave the letters to Pike. The first instructed Miller to prepare the hanging. The second promised Rusk payment for recovering the watch. The third, written after sunset, authorized the use of powder if the marshal would not surrender. Pike read them while Graves watched his life become paper in another man's hands. Lydia turned to Elena. I put the watch in the tub. Elena said nothing. I told myself it would be an arrest. Then I told myself Miller would stop the hanging. Then I told myself the marshal would save you. And that made what I had done smaller. Her voice broke. It never became smaller. No, Elena said. It did not. Lydia waited, perhaps for forgiveness, perhaps for punishment. Elena offered neither. Pike's deputy approached Graves with iron cuffs. The senator stepped back. Do you know who I am? Yes, said. That is why the cuffs fit. Graves looked at the town. You will regret this. Every man who worked my mine will regret it. The bank will close. The railroad will pull out. You will beg me to return. Caleb Dunn stepped forward and picked up the rope he had carried the previous day. For a moment, Graves flinched. Caleb did not put it around him. He dropped it at the senator's feet. My oldest boy worked 2 months without wages while you bought a new carriage, he said. Go explain progress to a judge. The deputy cuffed Graves. The metal clicked shut. Elena heard the sound and thought of the watch that had never ticked. That empty case had measured nothing. Yet it had brought an entire town to this hour. Graves was led toward the jail he had tried to destroy. As he passed Elena, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. You think this gives you a life? She looked at the dust on his coat, the cuffs on his wrists, and the townspeople who no longer moved aside for him. No, she said. It gives me back the one you tried to take. The arrest did not make the town clean. It only stopped the shooting. By 8 o'clock, the street had filled with the work left behind by the night. Women carried pails from the public pump. Men gathered spent cartridges and broken glass. The undertaker laid a canvas over one body near the alley and helped 2 wounded miners into the shade. No one spoke about the things they had shouted while darkness protected them. Marshal Pike placed Graves, Miller, Rusk, and Pritchard in separate cells. The rear wall was too damaged to hold them safely, so his deputies chained the prisoners to iron rings set into the front room floor. Graves demanded a private room. Pike gave him the corner nearest the broken window. Lydia sat on the jail steps with her hands folded around an untouched cup of water. She had asked to be held too. Pike told her she was not under arrest yet. The word yet kept her in place. Elena stood near the public pump while Mrs. Bell washed the cut on her forehead. The boarding house keeper's hands trembled. Twice she tried to speak and stopped. Finally she said, I should have done something. Elena watched pink water run down her cheek and drip from her chin. Yes, Mrs. Bell flinched. Elena did not soften the answer. She was too tired for the kind of mercy that required pretending. I was afraid of him, the older woman said. So was I. You stood up there anyway. I had a rope around my neck. Standing was all that remained. Mrs. Bell wrung the cloth into the basin. Your laundry roof caught fire after midnight. We put it out, but the back wall is gone. Elena closed her eyes for one breath. The shack was rented. Most of what she owned had been there. 2 dresses, her mother's blue bowl, the child seeds, a tin box with $37, and the account book containing every unpaid charge in Silver Creek. What survived? Some clothes. The stove. Toby dragged your trunk into the street before he rode out. The boy appeared at the edge of the crowd as if called by his name. He carried the trunk with Caleb Dunn. One corner had burned black. Elena opened it. Inside lay the blue dress, smoke-stained but whole. The child seeds were damp. The cracked bowl had broken into 3 pieces. Her account book rested beneath them. The leather cover had curled from heat, yet the pages remained readable. Elena touched it. For years, the book had seemed like proof of her failure. Names filled each page, followed by sums she had been too powerless to collect. Graves owed more than anyone: shirts, table linen, curtains, guest bedding, and 23 fine handkerchiefs. Lydia's account sat beneath his. Miller's came next. Pike looked over her shoulder. May I see that? It is laundry debt. Perhaps. He turned several pages. Beside each date, Elena had written brief notes so she could remember the source of difficult stains. Mine oil, red survey mud, printer ink, black powder, blood. On 3 dates, Graves's clothing carried red clay found only beyond the Western treaty markers. On another, Miller's coat showed powder dust the morning after Vale disappeared. Pike read the entries twice. You keep exact records. People argue less when paper remembers. Vale disappeared on March 17th. What did you wash on the 18th? Elena found the page. Graves, 1 black coat. Clay at lower hem, ink on right sleeve, wax under cuff. Sheriff Miller, 1 canvas coat, powder residue, torn pocket. Amos Rusk, trousers and shirt, blood at left knee, charged to mine account. Pike's expression changed. Did you ask about the blood? Rusk said a mule kicked him. Did he limp? No. Chato had come from the jail, his shoulder newly bandaged by the town doctor. He read the page in silence. Vale's bookmarks an abandoned ventilation shaft north of Tunnel 6, he said. The red clay there matches this description. Pike closed Elena's ledger. We search it now. Graves heard from inside the jail. You have no authority to enter my mine. Pike looked through the doorway. The authority is wearing your cuffs. They left within the hour. Pike took both deputies. Chato, Toby, Caleb Dunn, and 3 miners who had not joined the attack. Elena went too. Chato objected. She tied her hair back with a strip of clean cloth and ignored him. The mine sat 2 miles west of town where the hills rose in folds of red and brown. Ore carts waited on their rails. The stamping mill was silent for the first time anyone could remember. Without the machinery, the canyon seemed unsettled by its own quiet. The main entrance breathed cold air smelling of wet stone, metal, and old timber. Toby carried Vale's red survey book. Caleb held a lamp. Pike's deputies carried rifles. Chato walked at the rear, listening behind them. They passed Tunnel 6 and followed a narrow side passage, partly hidden by stacked timbers. Red clay coated the floor. Elena looked at her shoes. The same clay had dried on Graves's black coat. Farther in, the passage ended at a ventilation shaft covered by loose boards. One board had been nailed recently. The nail heads were bright beneath the dust. Caleb removed them with a pry bar. The smell reached them before the boards came free. No one spoke. At the bottom of the shallow shaft lay Clarence Vale. Time and the dry air had reduced him, but the surveyor's brass instrument case remained strapped across his back. A bullet hole marked the leather near his spine. Beside him lay a torn piece of Miller's canvas coat, caught on a nail. Sheriff Miller's frightened confession became a body. Pike sent Toby outside. Elena followed the boy as far as the entrance. He sat on a crate with both hands between his knees, staring at the sunlight. I thought he left, Toby said. Mr. Vale told me he might take the stage. He wanted you to believe there was still time. I should have shown the book earlier. To whom? Toby looked toward town. Elena sat beside him. You hid what he asked you to hide. You brought it when someone could use it. Do not borrow guilt from the men who killed him. The boy rubbed his thumb across the black stallion's reins. Marshal Chato said silence is a decision. It is, so is speaking. You made both decisions while men with guns searched for you. Adults who stood safely in the square did less. Toby considered that. Will I have to testify? Yes, I am still afraid. So am I. He looked at her. She pointed toward the mine entrance. Fear does not leave because a door opens. Sometimes it walks out beside you. By noon, Pike's men raised Vale's body. They also found a locked iron cash box in a side office containing altered land deeds, payroll books, and letters between Graves and a railroad agent. The documents showed that the senator had borrowed against ore he had no legal right to sell. He had then used the borrowed money to buy the bank, the hotel, the sheriff, and half the town's mortgages. The empire had not been built on silver alone. It had been built on the same unpaid labor recorded in Elena's laundry book, multiplied until it covered a county. Back in Silver Creek, Pike read a federal seizure notice from the bank steps. The mine would close temporarily. The bank records would be secured. Food and payroll reserves would be distributed under court supervision. The announcement brought no cheering. Men calculated what they might lose. Women counted flour sacks. Shopkeepers closed ledgers and opened them again. The truth did not arrive as sunlight. It arrived as an audit. Caleb Dunn found Elena outside the burned laundry. "I carried the rope," he said. "She was separating wet clothes from scorched ones. I saw. I believed him. You wanted to." He nodded, accepting the distinction. "Tell me what I can do." Elena handed him a blackened roof beam. "Move that." He did. By late afternoon, 6 miners were clearing the shack. Mrs. Bell brought stew. The schoolteacher repaired the door hinge. Sloan from the livery replaced 2 floorboards. No one called it forgiveness. They worked because the damage was visible and their part in it could no longer be hidden. Chato sat in the shade with his injured shoulder, sharpening a broken window latch into a small hook. Elena brought him stew in the blue enamel cup from the jail. "You should be resting," she said. "I am sitting. You are making a tool. My hands object to idleness." She sat on the step beside him. Across the road, Lydia remained under guard on the hotel porch. She had changed into a plain brown dress borrowed from Mrs. Bell without lace, perfume, or Graves's rooms behind her. She looked younger and less certain. "Will Pike arrest her?" Elena asked. "Likely. Conspiracy, false accusation, attempted obstruction. Her testimony may reduce the sentence." "Should it?" Chato stopped sharpening. "That is for a judge." "I did not ask the judge." He looked toward Lydia. "She chose comfort until comfort became dangerous," he said. "Then she chose truth. Late truth still has use. It does not erase the rope." Elena watched Caleb carry another beam from the ruins. Everyone wants the morning to make them different people. Morning only makes them visible. She turned the blue cup in her hands. The enamel had chipped along the rim during the blast. "What about Miller?" He confessed after Graves lost. "So did Lydia." "Yes." "And the miners lowered their rifles after Pike arrived." "Yes." "Then no one here was brave except Toby." Chato considered it. Courage is rarely clean. Sometimes it is only shame that finally moves its feet. Elena looked at him. "And you?" "I had a rifle and authority. You rode into a hanging alone. I had ridden past one before." She understood what he meant. Not in Silver Creek. Years earlier, in memory, where his uncle still stood beneath a mesquite while people watched. "That does not make this less," she said. He returned to the latch. "It makes it necessary." Near sunset, Marshal Pike came to the laundry ruins. "The hearing will be in Prescott in 12 days, he said. "Federal judge, territorial prosecutor, land commissioner, Graves has already requested release on bond. Will he get it?" Elena asked. "No." Pike held out a packet of papers. "Your formal witness summons. Travel and lodging paid by the court. Toby's as well." Elena took the packet. Her name was written across the front in a clerk's careful hand. "Not prisoner, not thief, witness." Pike looked at Chato. "And you will submit your report before we leave." Chato continued working the metal hook. "I will submit the evidence, the report too." "No," Pike exhaled slowly. "We can discuss that elsewhere. We can discuss it here." Elena felt the air change between them. Pike glanced toward the men cleaning the shack. "You stopped a lynching, held a federal post under attack, recovered evidence, and made 4 arrests. Washington will want an account." Washington knew the surveyor was threatened and sent 1 man. "I came at dawn. The wire was cut." "I know." Pike lowered his voice. "Do not make the institution answer for Graves. I do not. I ask it to answer for itself." Chato set the sharpened hook on the step. "When I accepted the badge, I was told the law did not see tribe or color. Yet every office I entered saw mine before it saw the star. Every order used my knowledge of Apache land, then questioned my word about what happened there. Yesterday, a senator built a gallows in the street. If Elena had died before I arrived, there would have been no investigation because the report would have called it lawful." Pike's jaw tightened. "You think leaving fixes that?" "No. Then stay." Chato looked at Elena's ruined shack. The charred boards, the workers who had only found their courage after surviving the consequences of cowardice. "I have not decided," he said. Pike nodded once. "Decide after Prescott." He walked away. Elena lifted the summons again. "I have never been to Prescott. You will dislike the dust." "I know dust." "The stairs, then." Government buildings believe justice improves with climbing. That made her smile for the first time since the laundry door opened. The expression felt strange on her face. Chato noticed and looked away quickly, giving it room. They left Silver Creek 3 days later. Marshal Pike rode at the front with Graves and Miller in a barred prison wagon. Rusk and Pritchard traveled in a second wagon under deputy guard. Lydia sat beside Mrs. Bell in the passenger coach, hands folded over a plain carpet bag. Toby rode the black stallion until Pike ordered him onto the coach roof to rest. Elena drove her own small buckboard. She had salvaged enough from the laundry to fill 2 crates. The account book lay beneath the seat, wrapped in oilcloth. Her mother's blue bowl, repaired with wire by the school teacher, rested between folded blankets. Chato rode beside her, his injured shoulder strapped beneath his coat. The road climbed north through dry grass and broken mesas. At night they camped near water when they could find it. The prisoners ate beans from tin plates. Graves complained about the coffee, the chains, the dust, and the indignity of sleeping within sight of hired miners. No one answered him. On the second evening, Elena sat beside a low fire mending Toby's torn shirt. The boy watched her needle move in and out of the cloth. "Will the judge believe me?" he asked. "He will hear you," she said. "That is not the same." "No." Toby frowned at the fire. Chato sat across from them, cleaning his rifle. "Tell only what you saw. Do not guess what Lydia thought or what Graves planned. Leave that to their letters. What if the prosecutor makes me confused? Ask him to repeat the question. What if Graves looks at me? Look at the judge. What if the judge looks like Graves?" Chato paused. "Then look at Elena." Toby nodded, satisfied. Elena tied off the thread. "You assume I will not be frightened." "No," Chato said. "I assume you will answer anyway." Prescott appeared on the 4th afternoon, a spread of brick, timber, wagon yards, and government roofs beneath a pale sky. Elena had imagined a place of broad streets and quiet order. Instead, it smelled of horse manure, hot bread, printer's ink, and men arguing outside offices. The federal courthouse stood on a rise above the town. Its steps were as numerous as Chato promised. The hearing began the next morning. Judge Abel Harcourt was not like Graves. He was heavier, older, and wore spectacles that slid down his nose. Yet the room still belonged to men in dark coats who handled paper as if it were cleaner than labor. Elena sat at the witness table in her smoke-stained blue dress. Graves wore a borrowed suit. Without his watch chain and polished boots, he seemed diminished, but his voice remained smooth. His attorney began with Elena's work. "You entered private homes to collect laundry. You handled valuable clothing? Yes. You searched pockets? I emptied them before washing. So you had frequent access to money, jewelry, and documents. I had frequent access to lint." A few people in the gallery laughed. The judge struck his gavel once, though his mouth nearly moved. The attorney changed direction. "Is it not true that Senator Graves owed you money?" "Yes." "And you resented him?" "I wanted payment. Did you threaten him?" "I asked if his missing surveyor needed his shirts returned." An odd remark from a laundress. An odd question from a man whose shirts carried survey ink. The attorney held up the silver watch. "This valuable object was found in your washtub. It was placed there by Lydia Sterling. You did not see her place it." "No." "So your claim depends on a boy hiding in an alley." "My claim depends on the truth. The boy was where he was." The attorney walked closer. "You expect this court to believe a United States senator risked his career because a laundress noticed ink?" Elena looked at Graves. "He risked my life because he believed no one would ask." The room became quiet. Pike's prosecutor then opened Elena's account book. He compared her laundry entries to Vale's survey dates, mine records, hotel registers, and Graves's letters. What had looked like household notes became a chronology. Ink on Graves's cuff the day Vale arrived. Red boundary clay on his coat after a secret trip west. Powder residue on Miller's clothing after Vale disappeared. Blood on Rusk's trousers. The records did not prove everything alone. Together with the body, map, ledger, letters, and witness statements, they gave each fact a place to stand. Toby testified after lunch. His feet did not touch the floor from the witness chair. He held the edge of the seat with both hands. When Graves looked at him, Toby turned toward Elena. Then he described Lydia's glove entering the clean water. He described the watch falling from her palm before she pretended to search. He described Graves waiting outside. Graves's attorney asked why Toby had not spoken during the hanging. "Because I was afraid," he said, "and now you are no longer afraid." "I am afraid right now." The answer ended the question more effectively than confidence could have. Lydia testified on the second day. She did not ask Elena to look at her. She identified Graves's handwriting on every letter. She described the affair, the favors, the money, and the quiet bargains by which she had convinced herself she possessed power. She admitted planting the watch. She admitted lying to Miller. She admitted visiting the jail because she feared the map would be found. "Why testify now?" the prosecutor asked. Lydia's fingers tightened around the witness rail. "Because every excuse I had sounded different after I saw the rope." Miller entered a guilty plea before taking the stand. He described Vale's warning, Graves's bribe, and the order to leave the surveyor's disappearance unexamined. He admitted announcing a sentence he had no right to impose. Graves listened with a stillness more frightening than anger. On the third day, the defense called him. He spoke for nearly 2 hours. He told the court Silver Creek had been nothing before he arrived. 6 shacks, a dry well, and a trail used by smugglers. He had attracted investors, negotiated rail access, opened the mine, founded the bank, and brought work to hundreds. The survey boundary, he claimed, was an administrative error, threatening everything he had built. "You concealed the original map," the prosecutor said, "to prevent panic while lawyers resolved the matter. You ordered Elena Montoya accused of theft. I ordered an inquiry. You authorized $500 for the watch and $500 for Marshal Chato's body. I authorized recovery expenses. You ordered black powder placed against a federal jail. I did not control the actions of drunken miners." The prosecutor held up Graves's letter. "Use Rusk. The rear wall will not survive a full charge. I want the watch and no witnesses by sunrise." Graves looked at the page. That phrase is taken out of context. The gallery stirred. Even Judge Harcourt removed his spectacles and looked at him directly. The hearing ended with Graves remanded for trial on murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, land fraud, bank fraud, obstruction, and theft of federal resources. Miller and Lydia were held for sentencing under cooperation agreements. Rusk and Pritchard faced separate charges. The mine and bank entered federal receivership. It was not a final verdict. But Graves returned to his cell without his own clothes, his own room, or anyone clearing a path. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Elena. They asked how it felt to bring down a senator. "I washed shirts," she said. "He brought himself down." They asked whether Chato was a hero. She looked toward him. He stood at the edge of the steps, uncomfortable beneath the attention. He did his job when other men refused to do theirs. A reporter wrote that down. Chato frowned at her later. "You could have said less." "I did." Marshal Pike found them near the stable that evening. "The department wants you in Tucson," he told Chato. "Promotion, supervisory authority over land investigations." Chato looked at the envelope Pike offered. "Does it come with more men? Eventually. More authority? On paper. More permission to arrive after someone builds a gallows." Pike lowered the envelope. "You cannot repair every failure by leaving, and I cannot repair it by becoming another office. Elena would be dead if you had not carried that badge." Chato touched the scar near his mouth. "She would be dead if I had believed the badge was enough." Pike said nothing for a while. Then he gave Chato the envelope anyway. "Read it before you decide." Chato folded it and placed it in his saddlebag. Elena watched but did not ask what he would choose. She had learned the difference between standing beside a decision and trying to own it. Elena remained in Prescott for 6 weeks. The land commissioner needed her to identify dates in the laundry ledger. The bank examiner asked her to explain why she had written blue clay beside some names and red clay beside others. A clerk copied every page in careful black ink, then returned the book as though it were valuable. For the first time, Elena's habit of noticing stains earned more than irritation. She rented a room above a bakery. Each morning began with the smell of yeast and scorched flour instead of lye. She found temporary work washing linens for the courthouse hotel, but she required payment every Saturday and closed the door when the manager suggested credit. Toby stayed with the telegraph operator's family and began carrying messages for the land office. He learned to read survey numbers. Within a month, he could explain the difference between a claim marker and a treaty marker to men twice his age. Lydia was sentenced to 3 years for conspiracy and false testimony, reduced because she surrendered the letters and testified. Miller received 7. Rusk and Pritchard were sent to Yuma to await trial for the jail attack. Graves's case was transferred to a larger court because the charges crossed territorial and federal lines. Elena attended Lydia's sentencing. Lydia wore a plain gray dress. When the judge asked whether she wished to speak, she turned toward Elena. "I cannot ask you to forgive me," she said. "No," Elena answered from the gallery. "I wanted you to know I understand that." Elena considered the woman who had once stood beside a clean tub wearing pale gloves. Understanding is a beginning, she said. It is not payment. Lydia nodded. That was all between them. Graves attempted to buy his way free until the bank examiner found that most of his money belonged to depositors. He attempted to threaten witnesses until the judge restricted his visitors. He attempted to blame Miller, Lydia, Rusk, Vale, the survey office, the Apache Nation, and finally the weather. The evidence did not become angry. It simply remained. In early autumn, a jury convicted him of conspiracy in Vale's death, attempted murder, federal land fraud, bank fraud, and obstruction. The murder charge itself ended in a disagreement over whether Graves had fired the bullet or only ordered it. Pike said the remaining convictions would keep him in prison longer than his name would keep anyone loyal. Elena did not celebrate. She bought a train ticket partway south and a wagon ticket the rest of the way to Silver Creek. When she arrived, the town looked both familiar and unfinished. The hotel sign still bore the bullet hole from Graves's second shot. The jail's rear wall had been rebuilt with darker stone. The hanging branch had been cut from the cottonwood, leaving a pale scar on the trunk. The mine had reopened under a federal receiver. Shafts beyond the treaty line remained closed, and a portion of the profits went into a restitution fund for tribal land use and unpaid wages. The bank reopened with new ledgers and fewer green shutters. No miracle followed. Some miners left. 2 shops failed. Mrs. Bell raised the price of bread. Caleb Dunn lost 1 room of his house but kept the rest. People cursed the receiver on Mondays and admitted on Fridays that wages now arrived when promised. Elena's laundry shack had a new roof. The boards did not match. One wall was made from pale pine, another from old cedar. A sign hung above the door. Montoya laundry payment due on delivery. The letters leaned slightly to the right. Toby had painted them. Inside, the tubs were clean. Her repaired blue bowl sat on a shelf. Beside it lay a packet of dried child seeds replaced by Mrs. Bell from her own garden. On the desk waited a stack of envelopes. Payments, not all she was owed, but enough. The town council had also enclosed a statement clearing her name. It carried 12 signatures, including the schoolteacher, Mrs. Bell, Caleb Dunn, and the new acting sheriff. Elena read it once and placed it beneath the account book. A public apology had been scheduled for Sunday. She canceled it. People who needed to speak to her could do so while looking at her face, one at a time. For several weeks she worked. The laundry filled again with steam, the scrape of washboards, and the snap of cloth in the yard. Yet the room no longer felt like a trap. The door had a lock. The accounts were current. She hired a widowed woman named Rosa with 2 children and paid her each Saturday before paying herself. Chato did not return with her. After the hearing, he took 2 assignments for Pike, one involving stolen army rations, another involving a rancher who had fenced a public spring. Letters came rarely and contained few words. Toby is learning too quickly and talking too much. Pike still believes paperwork is a weapon. Do not trust the eastern road after rain. Elena kept the letters in the same tin box as her land receipts. The last letter arrived in November. It contained the deed to her mother's homestead in San Miguel Canyon. The Federal Land Review had voided a fraudulent tax lien purchased by Graves's bank. The property was hers, free of debt, with the original water rights restored. There was no note from Chato, only a line added at the bottom of the commissioner's notice in his plain handwriting. Honest dirt. You said you wanted it. Elena closed the laundry for the afternoon. She walked to the sheriff's office carrying the deed. The new sheriff, a woman named Ada Ruiz who had served as a deputy in Tucson, listened while Elena explained. I will leave after the winter orders are finished, Elena said. Rosa can take over the business if the council recognizes the lease. Ruiz leaned back in Miller's old chair. The council will recognize whatever keeps them in clean shirts. On the corner of the desk lay a worn federal badge. Elena knew it immediately. The edges were smooth. Limestone dust remained in one groove despite someone's attempt to polish it. Where did that come from? Marshal Pike brought it last week, Ruiz said. Chato resigned. Elena touched the badge with one finger. Why leave it here? Pike said Chato told him this was where it had done its last honest work. The answer hurt more than she expected. Where did he go? West, maybe the high country, maybe the border. Pike did not know. Elena folded the deed and slipped it back into its envelope. She did not take the badge. It did not belong in a keepsake box. It belonged where every sheriff who sat behind that desk would have to see it. Winter came dry and bright. Elena finished the hotel curtains, the school blankets, and the mine office shirts. She collected every dollar owed. On the final Saturday, she handed Rosa the key. The woman stared at it. You built this. I survived it. That is not the same? No. Rosa looked around the warm room, at the clean tubs and the ropes of white linen. What will you do in the canyon? Plant beans. Repair the roof. Learn whether the peach tree is still alive. And wash clothes? My own. They laughed quietly. The wagon was loaded before dawn in February. Elena packed tools, seed, flour, coffee, 2 hens in a wooden crate, her mother's repaired bowl, the blue dress, and the account book. Toby, now employed as a junior chainman for the survey office, rode down from Prescott to help. He had grown half an inch and wore a hat too large for him. You should keep the ledger, he said while tying a crate. I am. For evidence? For memory of graves, of what people owe. Toby tightened the knot. That sounds like evidence. Mrs. Bell brought bread. Caleb brought a new shovel. Sheriff Ruiz brought a rifle and made Elena promise to oil it. Even Lydia sent something from the women's prison, a pair of sturdy gray gloves with no note. Elena placed them in the wagon. She did not know whether she would wear them. At sunrise, she climbed to the seat and gathered the reins. The people who had once watched a rope settle around her neck stood along the road. No speeches were made. No one asked her to absolve the town before leaving it. Caleb removed his hat. Mrs. Bell raised one hand. Elena nodded and drove south. The wheels found a steady rhythm over the hard ground. Silver Creek diminished behind her until the new laundry roof was only a pale square and the cottonwood a dark mark against the sky. She did not look back again. San Miguel Canyon lay 3 days away. The first day crossed open desert. The second climbed through juniper and broken red stone. On the third morning, clouds gathered over the mountains, carrying the smell of snow. Near noon, one wagon wheel sank into a wash softened by recent rain. Elena climbed down, set stones beneath the rim, and tried to lever it free. The mud held. She was cutting a branch for a longer brace when a horse approached from the ridge. The rider wore a brown trail coat. Elena stood very still. Nantan Chato came down the slope on his bay gelding, leading a pack mule. His hair had more silver than she remembered, or perhaps the clear mountain light revealed it. The scar along his jaw was the same. A bow case rested beside his saddle. No badge showed beneath his coat. He stopped beside the wagon. You took the low crossing, he said. It was dry last year. It rained 2 days ago. Your letter warned me about the eastern road. This is the western road. You should have been more specific. He looked at the buried wheel. So should you. They regarded one another. Then Chato dismounted and took the branch from her hands. Together they wedged stones beneath the rim, tied a rope to the axle, and used the bay horse to pull while Elena guided the team. The wheel rose from the mud with a wet sucking sound. No embrace followed. Chato checked the axle. Elena inspected the wheel spokes. The ordinary work made his presence real. What are you doing here? She asked. Passing through. To where? He looked toward the canyon. I have not decided. She understood the answer for what it was. Not evasion, but a life still being made. Pike said you resigned. He talks too much. Toby said the same about him. Toby talks more than both of us. Snow began as small dry grains ticking against the wagon canvas. Elena returned the lever branch to the roadside. The homestead has one room with a roof, she said. Another without one. The barn may be standing. Chato tightened the pack mule's lead rope. That sounds like work. It is. He waited. She did not ask him to stay. He did not offer. Some promises were damaged by being spoken too quickly. Elena climbed onto the wagon seat. Chato mounted his horse. They traveled into the canyon side by side. The homestead appeared near dusk. The adobe house leaned toward the creek but had not fallen. The barn roof was half gone. Cottonwoods stood bare along the water, their roots dark in the winter soil. The peach tree beside the house looked dead until Elena broke the tip of one branch and found green beneath the bark. She pressed her thumb to it. Alive, she said. Chato unloaded the shovel. They worked until dark enough to require a lamp. He cleared stones from the hearth, while Elena swept mouse nests from the shelves. They found a sack of dried beans in the wagon and cooked them with onion in a black pot. The house filled with wood smoke and the plain smell of supper. Chato slept in the barn. In the morning, he repaired the chimney. The next day, he replaced 2 roof beams. On the third day, Elena asked how long he was passing through. He looked at the unfinished roof, long enough to finish what rain can enter. Spring found him still there. They planted beans, chile, and corn in rows beside the creek. Toby visited with a survey crew and left 3 new boundary stakes marked with the federal seal. Elena set one near the field where she could see it from the kitchen window. The mark did not cage the land. It reminded anyone who came after what had been proven. Years later, people in Silver Creek would tell the story badly. Some said Chato shot 20 men from the jail window. Some said Elena broke the senator's jaw with an iron bucket. Some said the watch contained enough gold to buy Arizona. The tale grew because people preferred legends to the slow facts of work, fear, records, and testimony. Toby, who became a surveyor, corrected them when he had patience. He said the watch was empty except for a map. He said Elena's laundry book mattered as much as any gun. He said a crowd almost killed an innocent woman because each person expected someone else to stop it. At the homestead, Elena kept no newspaper clippings. The silver watch remained in a federal evidence cabinet. Graves died years later in prison, far from the mine and the people who once moved when he raised a finger. Lydia returned to Tucson after her sentence and found work copying records for a legal office. Miller disappeared into Yuma's prison system and wrote Elena one apology she never answered. The only object Elena kept from the jail was the chipped blue enamel cup. She used it to measure seed. Chato never wore another badge. When disputes reached the canyon, people still came to him. He listened, asked where the water ran, who had signed what, and which person had been ignored because speaking to them was inconvenient. Sometimes he carried a rifle. More often he carried a shovel. One summer evening, long after the house had a sound roof and the peach tree had begun to bear fruit, Elena sat on the porch repairing a work shirt. Chato came from the field with dust on his boots and a broken irrigation gate over one shoulder. "You were right," he said. "About what?" "The Western Road." "I should have been more specific." She looked up. His face was solemn, but his eyes were not. Elena set the shirt aside. Below them, water moved through the ditch with a quiet, steady sound. Cottonwood leaves turned silver in the evening wind. On the shelf inside the house, her mother's blue bowl held fresh chiles. The repaired wire showed between the pieces, not hiding where the bowl had broken, only keeping it useful. Elena watched the last light settle over the field. There had been no gift of justice, no sudden kindness from the town, the court, or the land. There had been a wet glove, an empty watch, a boy's note, a ledger, a map, and people who finally chose where to stand. The rest had been built by hand.